I've often racked my brain on how I'm going to make an engaging video about a DAC, a D to A converter. And some YouTube channels seem to review DACs almost every week, whereas I only review a few a year. Because to me, they are the least compelling device to review. And I find it difficult to get jazzed up about them. For example, I was sent a DAC headphone amp last spring that I really tried to get excited about, but I just couldn't get inspired. And I ended up sending it back. It was nice, it was a very competent, well-designed unit, but nothing about it stood out for me. Now, DACs are vital components in a good audio system, and contrary to what many misinformed enthusiasts avow, they do not all sound alike. You don't just get the one with the best specs and measurements. I have a few standalone DACs, and in this room there's a topping D70S at my desk and the Hollow Audio Spring 3 KTE in my main system. And I remember that I did get pretty jazzed reviewing the topping D70S back in early 2021 because it was such an improvement over the $99 shit Modi 3 that I had been using. It was like I was in a room with the curtains drawn before, and then someone opened them up and let the light in, and I bought one immediately. It is a solidly made piece of engineering with a remote and a great array of inputs and outputs. It has great specs if they matter to you, and it was very highly regarded by enthusiasts 3 years ago. The Hollow Audio DAC delighted me as well because it was my gateway into higher-end hi-fi electronics, and I was able to try it in my home and experience what is possible if you invest in some nicer next-level gear. It's my current reference DAC. Well, Apos Audio sent me a DAC, the SMSL D400EX, to try out. And I've had it for a few weeks now, and the notion of sending it back without a review has not crossed my mind once because I am inspired. The D400EX has been out for a few months and has a retail price of $960, which is not a low-budget model, so you should get something pretty nice for that kind of money. Like a lot of modern Asian electronics, it looks and feels very premium with milled silver aluminum casework, has ribbed side panels, and a sharp and vibrant glass display. The only corners being trimmed are in the area of the remote control. It's a standard lightweight plastic unit, but it handles all the functions and it works just fine. On the front, we have a nice color display that informs you of the volume level and your input and whether you are in PCM or DSD mode, and it turns off after a minute or so of inactivity, and it has a flush mounted rotating wheel disc to adjust volume and settings, and 3 rectangular buttons to its right. And the top one toggles through the inputs when you press it. The middle one opens up the menu to change the settings, the multitude of settings options, and the bottom button toggles through the outputs from balanced and unbalanced to both. I have to say that I'm not enamored by this design, and it is too fiddly for my liking, so I've just been using the remote for changing things. Peeking around to the back, we have a nice selection of inputs and outputs, starting with the power switch and the power cord connection. Then we get I2S, USB, optical, coaxial, and AES inputs. And then there are the sets of balanced and unbalanced outputs. And lastly, there's a Bluetooth antenna connection. Inside the D400EX, there is the star of the show, the latest and greatest AKM DAC chipset. It employs an all-new triple-chip D to A conversion solution that completely separates the digital and analog circuitry. And please don't ask me to explain how it all works, though. That stuff is way above my head. It also has MQ... I'm not going to mention that feature, as it has thankfully become mostly irrelevant. Now, SMSL also make the D400ES model, which look looks almost identical and employs the flagship ESS Sabre DAC chipset instead of the AKM, and it retails for $160 less. I cannot compare them because I don't have one in the house to try, but my previous experience with Sabre-based DACs tells me that it will likely have a presentation that emphasizes the higher frequencies and gives you a bit more detail up top. But I'm just speculating. To evaluate the D400EX, I started out by comparing it head-to-head with the older topping unit. The topping D70S model is 3 years old and has pre-factory fire AKM DAC chips inside. And I've been pretty happy with it as primarily a desktop unit, as it's connected to a Mac Mini either directly via USB or with I2S through a Singzer SU6 DDC bridge. So I used the Singzer bridge to connect the SMSL and topping via I2S and compared them head-to-head through my NATE 5SI integrated amp, through PROAC Response 2.5 loudspeakers, and Sennheiser HD650 headphones. Feeding the same tracks from Roon to the NATE, I can quickly switch between both DACs to compare them. And in my opinion, the SMSL comes out on top in almost every regard. To my ears, it has a superior mid and high frequency resolution and a more refined and soothing tone overall, in clear contrast to the slightly rolled off highs and to some extent congested mid-range of the older topping DAC. To me, the newer SMSL sounds more open and expansive, while the topping sound is more constrained and smaller in scale. The lower bass frequencies and impact of both models is excellent in that department, and I couldn't detect any difference, to be honest. Now, moving the D400EX to my main system, it performs just as well with a lovely detailed and dynamic presentation, yet there's an ease to how it lets the music flow. It's just effortless. Personally, I do prefer the tone of this DAC to models that squeeze every last drop of detail out of the music. The even-handed and, dare I say, analog-sounding rendition of the albums and tracks that I was selecting was extremely pleasurable and appealing. I just recently reviewed the Orchard Audio Pecan Pi Plus that has a very similar AKM DAC implementation, and I was impressed with its fantastic audio output as well. I'll put a link below to that review. Head-to-head with my reference Hollow Audio Spring 3 KTE DAC, which is 3 times the price of the D400EX, it compares favorably, but the Spring 3 just bestows the music with a scale that is considerably larger, with better instrument separation, and a more tangible atmosphere and soundstage. However, I could happily live with the SMSL DAC if I did not have the Spring 3. Yes, indeed. The only negatives I can cite about it are the front panel controls, which put style over user-friendliness. To my ears, the sound quality is faultless at the price. It really is my cup of tea. And I say if you're looking to upgrade your current DAC or considering getting your first one, definitely put the SMSL D400EX on your short list. This DAC is amazing and is very highly recommended by me. I've seriously been considering buying one, but you may know that I also like to dabble in vintage and older hi-fi gear. And a few months ago, I came across a very interesting 30-year-old DAC. I mean, in the early 90s, I wasn't even aware that you could buy a separate DAC component. I was just buying CD players with their own built-in DACs back then, right? Well, I acquired this California Audio Labs Sigma Tube analog processor for $100 from a friend who had no use for it. And he put a new tube in it, and he said it was working. Yes, it has a tube inside. I'm not going to go into their detailed history, but California Audio Labs was a highly regarded audio manufacturer during the 80s and 90s who produced a variety of innovative hi-fi components. In particular, in the digital side of things, and I believe they were the first to put a tube in a CD player, but sadly the company was shut down in 2002. The Sigma retailed for $695 in 1992, and along with their other products was sold in high-end stores around the world. The chunky metal box is very simple with a green LED on the front, and around back there's the power switch, power cord socket, 2 digital inputs, coax and optical, a small switch to enable one or the other, and a pair of analog RCA output jacks. And it doesn't have USB because USB was not invented until 1996. Inside there is a single-bit Delta Sigma D-to-A processor made by Crystal Semiconductor. And like every California Audio Labs component I've seen, the build quality is top-notch. It has a well-laid-out board with high-quality parts and a robust chassis. What differentiates this DAC from the mainstream is the addition of a 12AX7 tube or valve integration into the FET gain stage. And I always get excited when I see a component with a tube inside. It's been sitting on a shelf for a while, and I decided to hook it up for this video just for fun. And I honestly did not know what to expect when I connected this to my desk system. I reckon that 30 years is a relatively long time in the world of digital, so I wasn't expecting much from this dinosaur of a DAC. Let me tell you, I'm flabbergasted by how good this old-timer sounds. Music tracks just boogie and shimmer with this Sigma DAC. The refinement and detail up top is excellent without a hint of glare or stridency. And the mid-range is smooth and warm and relatively emphasized compared to the modern topping and SML models, and that's what I like about it. Is it the tube? Could very well be. There are practical reasons for adding a tube to a DAC. It's not a gimmick. And it's said that tubes improve the output in the analog stage. And California Audio Labs was one of the first to employ tubes in digital devices, but numerous tube DACs have been designed by other respectable manufacturers over the years since. Compared to the SMSL, it's certainly less refined and balanced, but it's got more personality. Of the 3 DACs, the D400EX is all round a superior component, as I described earlier. The Achilles heel of the Sigma is that it chokes on digital streams higher than 24-bit 48 kilohertz. It makes a loud, stuttering, clicking sound when it's unable to lock on to the high-res signal. Released in 1992, high-res files were not as commonplace as they are today. But connected to a CD player or by downsampling the digital output of your computer to 2448 or below, it will work great. And I was definitely preferring the Sigma over the topping DAC. It was just giving me that something extra that the D70S was not. But then, last night, I was listening to some bass-heavy tracks from Massive Attack through headphones. And I quickly was switching between the 3 DACs, and I'm hearing some very noticeable bass distortion through the Sigma that wasn't audible previously. What's going on here? And I checked and changed the cables and connections, and it made no difference. Then I opened it up and swapped out the tube with another 12AX7, and it made no difference. So, as usual, when you're dealing with older gear, there's always the possibility that they will require servicing. I'll take it to Jim, my tech guy, to take a look at it, and maybe the old electrolytic capacitors need to be replaced or something. Oh well, more expense. The topping will remain in its place for the time being. But should I just put the servicing money towards a new D400EX? To my past, present, and future subscribers, thanks for hanging out with me for the past 14 minutes. I hope you liked this one. Do I really need to tell you what to do to show your support for this channel? I do? Alright, well, please like, comment, and subscribe. There's a link below. Also, there's a link below to join my Patreon, which gets you ad-free early access and other amazing content. Until next time, don't forget to enjoy your own devices. Ciao!